So you want to try to be a DM, or maybe you have a group of people that need a DM and no one else wants to do it. But you have no idea where to begin. Look at all this shit you have to do. Or maybe you are a devoted DM and you're about to put way too much effort into something that you don't have to. Being a DM can be an incredibly hard task, and more likely than not, you're lazy as heck and don't want to put any effort into things like building a world, creating a plot, managing players, learning the rules, thinking on your feet, and other things DMs do. On top of that, there's so much to keep track of, like NPCs, the plot, settings, magical item, the rules, the shop prices, the encounters, the player schedules, the stat blocks, the saving throws, the descriptions, and every little detail, and the motherfucking weather. Ugh, being a DM sounds so hard, you may be thinking. Well, fear not, you lazy jackwagon. Here's a guide for you to do the bare minimum and still be a decent dungeon master. This guide will save you so much time, effort, and sleep so that you don't have to worry about the majority of this shit. This is how to trick people into thinking you're a cool DM with a well thought out plan and world when you're really just a noob who has no idea what they're doing. As a DM, I used to be intimidated about running a bunch of players in this huge world I had to create. And I used to pat myself on the back all the time like, wow, I'm doing the Lord's work. And then I saw all the resources out there for DMs and I realized, anyone can do this. I'm just doing everything the hard way. After looking at all these resources, there's pretty much no reason why anyone can't be a DM. Except, time commitment and not knowing the basic rules. So as someone who is apparently an awesome DM according to all 17 of my players, yes, I DM 3 campaigns. Yes, I do have ADHD. I am here to provide you a guide full of resources of how to make your life as a DM much easier. The first step of being a DM is building the world. There's so much that goes into building a world, and there's so much to manage. You have the map, you have the religions, you have the races, the cultures, the languages, things like wars, plagues, current events, politics and governmental structures, roads, stuff they'll encounter on said roads, the ports, the things that are traded at said ports, gangs and rebel groups, cults. Goodness, that's so much to do, you may be thinking. I have to buy a map building program, shape the continent, shape the world, place down every single individual tree, make several maps to show the or just use Asgard's fantasy map generator. This will solve almost all your problems when it comes to building the world, and I will teach you how to use it to its fullest potential, as this is the best tool for a lazy and broke DMs. It will not just give you a map, but things you didn't even know you needed, like altitude, terrain, cities, religion, cultures, states, provinces, roads, climate, population, flags, military bases, types of government, current events, motherfucking weather. You don't even need all of these. You think I care about what weather I have in my games unless the plot demands it? It can even generate whole town maps for you. You have zones for conflict, rebellious factions, plagues, natural disasters, things that can help you build your plot. It will even give you landmarks and random encounters for the players. You can even use it as a grid to indicate where the players are on the map. There's even measurement tools to determine how far your players are going and how long it's going to take for them to get there, so you don't have to think about that anymore either. You can also edit all of this and regenerate them entirely. They have charts for stuff you never knew you needed. You can even see what the world looks like as a globe. Why would you need to see your world as a globe, you may ask? Because the players might ask you if your world is flat, which happened to me once. Now, it doesn't do everything. You still have the languages and the races to put in there, and of course, your plot. But I'm sure that won't be too hard for you. Put the elves here, put the goblins here. It's not too hard. Or you can have our next resource determine it for you if you want to do even less work. Want to generate an individual city? Fantasy Town Generator. You have to have an account for this, but this is by far the best way to do things. And you can share all this info with your players too, so they can look at it. But what if my players don't want to get an account to view the map, you may be asking? Then tell them to suck it up. It costs nothing, then they've already sold their soul to Roll20 and D&D Beyond, so what's one more site? This will generate a random city for you. If that's not enough for you, you can search for specific buildings like the lazy zoomer or millennial you are.
Do you want to know what else this thing does? It generates population.
This will tell you the number of buildings, the percentages of upper and lower class, the races, the professions, so you can determine what this town specializes in, and even individual people, so you don't have to think of NPCs that run the shops and the gangs. Another thing this baby can do is tell you who lives in what house. Just click on a building and it tells you what NPCs live there, who's there at the moment, what they do, who they're affiliated with. Then you click on a person and it'll tell you their appearance, age, race, personality, their motivations, their relationships, and even their stats if the players decide to fight them for whatever reason. It even has their gosh darn family tree. You literally never have to think of NPCs ever again. You can also generate random events at that building if you or the players are getting bored and need some kind of stimulation. You literally just have to click a button and this thing DMs for you. This thing will create factions for you, what it is, what their goals are, what they do, how they do it. Districts with a brief history, what it's known for, the demographics, who lives there. If you don't want to spend time and edit every single little thing, then you can deal with the pre-settings and add the races, genders, religions, and other things. It even has a time counter to keep track of what time it is in the city. This will also move the NPCs around so you don't have to keep track of where everyone is. You can also edit it as well, adding, removing, or changing any of these things however you like. Again, you don't have to even use all these features. You think I monitor my NPCs? Nah. They do whatever I want and go wherever I tell them to go. Just remember to write everything down so you don't forget what goes where and so your players think, wow, you're so well organized and creative. Or put it into World Anvil. Bitches love World Anvil. World Anvil is less of a place to create and more of a place to organize, which is incredibly important as a DM. But since they are not sponsoring me, a Google Doc also works if you're too lazy to sign up for World Anvil. These things literally can write the plot for you, giving you inspiration to further create your world. If that doesn't suit you, there's other places that will generate stuff for you as well. Kassoon has literally everything. This thing can generate towns and even whole-ass worlds. After you're done having your world created for you, have the players finish writing it. It's very simple. You have an outline of your world, your players tell you what races and classes they want to play, and you wrap your world around their ideas. And the plot, but we'll get to that later. Look at this. This is a prime example of I'm making you guys write my world for me. And it worked! This was a great campaign! With tools like this at your disposal, all you have to do is click buttons and you have a world. The world is the easy part. Now it's time for the harder part. You need to have an overarching plot or this campaign is going to go on forever and you're likely way too lazy to keep that up. But what if I'm not creative enough to come up with a plot, you may ask? Well, my smooth-brained charlatan, if the plot hasn't already come to you through using generators, there's still more tools to help you do that. Kassoon. This thing can generate a whole-ass campaign for you, including all the gods and religions, the big bad evil guy, the people that can exposition dump to your players, the culture, whatever. And this costs absolutely 0 IRL gold. This thing will generate plot hooks, plot twists, and even the start of the whole gosh darn session. If not, don't worry about it now. Sometimes it comes to you after you set up your world. Sometimes it comes to you as your players create their characters. I like to incorporate my characters' backgrounds into the story whenever I can. Basically, all it took for me to write most of my plot was for one character to play a paladin. And bing bada boom, God of Death is dying, we need to save the afterlife from falling apart. And they fucking love it. Don't want to keep track of other things? There's a website for that, and more likely than not, it's Kassoon. Remember when I said Kassoon does everything? Well, it does everything, and I'm here to show you. Calendar so you remember what day you're on? Kassoon. Can't think of a good name for an NPC? Kassoon. Need an encounter that doesn't involve violence? Kassoon. Need a puzzle for a dungeon? Kassoon. Can't think of an insult to throw at a player that just did something stupid? Kassoon. Random junk, useless magical junk, or an actual cool random item? Kassoon. You can even make the items cursed. Are you a lazy player that can't come up with a character? Kassoon. Need a city street, a building, or a dungeon map? Kassoon. Boss fights, location descriptions, quests, treasure drops, big bad evil guys, wilderness? You bet your sweet furry ass it's all on Kassoon. This thing will describe for you an entire dungeon with everything in it. It will give you a dungeon map, traps, monsters, treasures. Literally all you have to do is click a button. You literally have to do nothing. This thing has some of the most useless shit until you actually end up needing it. There is literally no reason not to use them unless you're actually creative. If you're too lazy to scroll through all these things and want them all on your screen at once, there is a DM screen for that where you can have all of these on your screen at once. On top of that, they have a bunch of resources for newbie DMs. Here are some other useful resources that I, a creative person, actually use. Spell scroll generator, when you want to throw a random spell scroll at your players. Potion prices, an even better NPC generator because this one has all the races. Shop prices, the bestiary. The bestiary is the bestiary because they have tokens too. RPG Bot has a lot of different things. And if that's not enough, Roll20 has a bunch of resources that you can use, like default tokens, calculating all your shit for you, keeping track of health numbers. I have never not used Roll20. I can't imagine DMing D&D in person. Doing my own math? Google it, and I'm sure someone's created a tool for it. But where am I gonna find the maps for my players, you may ask? Did you think I would leave out the maps? I mean, theater of the mind is always an option, but if you want people to think you're super awesome, here's some maps you can use. Your best friend for finding maps is going to be Google. But be sure to scale correctly. Make sure that when you click on a map and you get that map, you get its dimensions too. If not, you're just gonna have to count the squares. Because the last thing your players want to see is that unaligned, ugly grid. Kassoon, yes, this Swiss Army knife of a website even has free maps. If not, you can generate your own. Or, if you want the real high quality stuff, you can sell your soul and pay for a subscription to a map making Patreon to be your designated map making lover. I picked Chepeku because they are beautiful. And they'll have different variations of the same map, like day, night, throughout the different seasons, or just scroll through Pinterest, Reddit, and Google Images until you find your Patreon soulmate. Mine happened to be Chepeku, but perhaps yours is Mapzilla, Zen Maps, Fantasy Atlas, Birdie Maps, Cyber Maps, or another Patreon. Some of these Patreons also have stuff for the broke people too, so don't worry. Don't want to spend money? Crosshead Studios, Seafoot Games, and 2 Minute Tabletop are also awesome places that have really nice maps that cost you nothing. Okay, I got everything set up, but where do I get my players? One word: Reddit. LFG and LFG Europe and a couple of other LFGs, this is where you find plenty of hungry players, especially forever DMs, that are starving for a willing DM. If this is your first time DMing, get experienced players that have DM'd in the past. That way you worry less about the rules and forever DMs can finally get to play. It's a win-win. Get players that love to RP and say this will be a RP heavy game. Remember, the more players RP, the less work you have to do. Or maybe give them some RP encounters for whenever you don't want to do any work. Like, give them a body swap arc, a beach episode. Everyone is tripping balls. Everyone faces their worst fear. The classic maze or dungeon. Have a requirement that your players have to have their backstories tied to another player's. That'll get them bonding. Trust me, I've had encounters that I have planned for one session take 5 to complete because of RP. I have gone months without planning things before because one of my parties is just so RP heavy. I have a couple parties where I just mostly sit back for most of the session and just watch them roleplay. But D&D has so many rules, you may say. I don't know if I can learn them all. Well, hold on there, buddy. What if I told you that you don't have to learn all the rules? This is where rules lawyers and backseat DMs are actually a good thing. Having experienced players help you when you are unsure is, in my opinion, the best way to learn the rules of D&D. You think I know all the rules of D&D? No. I rely on my backseat DMs for a lot of complicated things, or I just Google it. But I at least know the basics. Basically, all you need to really know is basic combat turn consistency, all the rules regarding combat, what the character sheet stuff is and does, and maybe the basics of your player's classes, like how many attacks they get or what concentration is, and whatever is a part of their attack stuff. And that's it! If even that sounds overwhelming, don't worry, Kassoon has a list of all the stuff you have to remember for combat. Combat is the most complex thing here. It may be best to make a list of each player and the non-spell actions that they can take per turn. Spells have the instructions on the label, so you don't have to worry about any of that. It's also a good idea to establish your crit and nat 1 and 20 rules, because those are different with every DM. Otherwise, just make shit up. Don't know what skill check the player should make? Make it up. Don't know how much damage a random attack should do? Make it up. What are the players gonna do? Check? If they do, then they're doing your job for you. And you still win. Remember, it's okay to ask your players for input on the rules. If they are good people, they will understand that DMing is hard and that you have a lot of shit to keep track of. But what if my players are doing crazy and complex things that aren't in the rules or on Google? Ah, so you have a party that wants to do crazy shit. Well, I have a rule for my players that want to do this, and that is, do stupid shit, calculate the stupid math. It's also a good idea to start your players off at a low level so that there's less mechanics for you to remember. Having players learn some of the rules can be helpful. That way the burden isn't entirely on you. When in doubt, have the players figure it out. If the players turn to you, then you actually have to get up and do something, which happens a lot less often than you think. Or just Google whenever a rule you don't know comes up. Remember, Google is your friend. But I'm so bad at improv, I can't DM. It's not improv if you prepare enough. Write out a few lines ahead of time maybe. Anticipate as much as possible so you have less to worry about making stuff up. Kassoon has many different ways you can avoid improv as much as possible, like NPC generators, descriptors. When in a bind, throw them an RP counter, which Kassoon can also generate. If you pay money, Kassoon even has improv cheat sheets. But when in doubt, your saving grace is ChatGPT. That always helps, especially with descriptions when you don't want to describe a setting. I recommend having some kind of literary AI open next to you at all times if you're really bad at improving. Shit, this idea is genius. Why didn't I think of this before?
You can't just AI your way out of everything. There's still actual work you have to do. Moderation, guiding the players but not railroading them, keeping things engaging, scheduling, making sure that things are balanced screen time and power-wise, making sure the players are having fun, and knowing at least the rule basics. And another important thing that a lot of even experienced DMs miss is debriefing. As someone who took wargaming classes, I'm going to depart with you some advice that not a lot of people use. Always debrief your players. And by debriefing, I mean set aside some time after the session to just talk and get out of character. Or as we say in wargaming, leave the magic circle and return to reality. This will diminish the negative feelings from the game carrying into real life. It is especially helpful if you have players that have a hard time separating their behavior from their character's behavior. Debriefing works better when you see everyone's faces, but not everyone is comfortable with that. But in more serious and dire situations, like if problems are actually coming up, or if conflicts are actually escalating into real life, maybe push for that face cam. Just because you're a DM doesn't mean you're a good DM. You may use these tools as a guideline, but relying on them 100% for anything for more than a one-shot will get tiring, especially if your players aren't passionate and need motivation. If you're not passionate about your campaign, your players won't be either. If that was a lot of info for you, don't worry. I'm going to run through it all again so that now you have a nice step-by-step guide to have your world ready by session 1. Now you don't have to think about that part either. Learn the basic rules of D&D. Get the world ready. Get the plot ready. Put it all into one convenient platform like a World Anvil or Google Doc. Recruit all your players if you don't have any. Have your players make their characters. Then tinker your world as necessary. Start session 0. Tinker some more. Prepare session 1. Get the maps, encounters, plots, characters. Make sure you know what tools you want to use. And then, session 1. With all these resources out there, being a DM is easier than ever. These days, all you have to do is click a few buttons, learn a few basic rules, and then moderate and improv as necessary. And that's if you want to do the absolute bare minimum. I don't use most of the stuff. I use Asgard's maps, but just for like the maps and the city stuff. I didn't even know most of these resources or some of their functions even existed until I made this video. Kinda wish I knew about all of this before setting up some of my previous campaigns. I just use some of these things like a magic items generator or the fantasy town or a general map because players love maps. While you may not rely on these 100%, and I hope you don't, it's a good place to start and makes DMing seem a lot less scary. The world needs more DMs, and these people know that. So with all these resources and advice at your disposal, hopefully you're a lot less scared about DMing and are ready to do the Lord's work and run a D&D campaign. Or just run a module and throw this entire video out the window.